Good afternoon. We are going to be getting started here in about 4 minutes for our session 3 of our workforce webinars, looking at a deep dive on work-based learning for both the construction and agriculture industries. Thanks again for joining us today. We're excited to be able to share some pretty great information with you and answer your questions and get you started on the work-based learning journey, or maybe all of you have some more integral questions about how you can incorporate the emerging workforce into your company's organizations. So we'll get started here in about 3 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon to those of you that are joining us. We're going to get the webinar started here in just a few minutes. Thanks again for joining for our session 3 of our workforce webinars, a deep dive into the work-based learning nuances for both the agriculture and construction industries. We look forward to sharing more information and learning from all of you. Looks like we have a good crowd joining us. We're going to wait for a few more minutes to get our session 3 of our workforce webinar started, a deep dive into work-based learning for both the construction and agriculture industries. Thanks again for joining us today, and we're going to get started here in a minute or two. Well, good afternoon. We're right at noon, and I know that's our start time, but we recognize that this time of the week and this time of the day, sometimes people are a little bit lagging. So we're going to wait 1 or 2 minutes here to let the rest of our registrants join us for our session 3 of the workforce webinars, looking at a deep dive into our work-based learning for both the agriculture and construction industries. We're excited to have you all here today, and we're going to get started here in a minute or two. All right. Well, wanting to be respectful of time, we are 1 minute after noon, and we're going to get started with our session 3 of our workforce webinars, a deep dive on work-based learning for both the construction and agriculture industries. First and foremost, I want to thank you for joining us today. We're going to go over a few logistics, and then we're going to dive right in to information. So at this point, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Jane Bingsness-Frisch, and I serve as the Vice President of Workforce for the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber. Have the opportunity to connect, convene, and collaborate to ensure that we have a thriving workforce within the entire region. So feel very fortunate to be able to share some content with you today and talk through more how we can collaborate related to work-based learning. Patrick, you want to introduce yourself and kind of share a little bit more about the agenda, and then I'll talk over some logistics.
Yeah, so it's great to see everybody. My name is Patrick Minear. I'm the CEO and founder of Golden Path Solutions. The only time you'll ever see me in a suit is in this picture. So it's really great to visit with you all. I'll give it back to Jane. She'll walk a little bit through logistics, and then we'll start talking about the content for the day. Back to you, Jane.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. All right. So what's this all about? Well, before we start, I just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware that we are recording this webinar. We have received several requests to be able to go back to this content, discuss it. It will kind of live in perpetuity until we do a new updated version within our website. And all of you that are attending today will have that opportunity to receive that link and be able to refer back. You'll also get some information from us after the webinar, some additional supporting materials related to all of our speakers' perspectives and insights and policies. So one thing that we really hope that all of you will do, since we're talking about two very specific industries, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to throw those in the chat. I will be monitoring that along with my colleague Heidi, and we will be asking those throughout. Or if it's comfortable for you when we get to the end and it's the question and answer session, please feel free to turn on your camera or turn it on the entire time. We'd love to see all of your smiling faces and unmute, and you can certainly ask those questions. There's also a hand raise feature within our team's platform here. And then another thing is we're going to be referencing a lot of material today. And as I mentioned, we'll have some follow-up materials sent out to all of you. But in addition, throughout the conversation today, when we refer to certain things, we'll also be including those in the chat box. And again, at the end, we just would ask that you fill out a feedback survey on how today went, but more so even what you want to learn in the future so we can best support you. All right, Patrick.
Cool. Well, the first thing I'm going to talk a little bit about who the presenters are for today's webinar, and we actually have a fifth one, a special guest that we'll kind of save towards the end. But essentially, these folks are going to be talking to you about different parts of the agenda. You've already heard from Jane and myself, but we also have Bryce Johnson, who is the CEO of the Building Industry Association here in the region, formerly the Home Builders Association. And then we also have Liesl Zamora, who is the program administrator and child labor supervisor with the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry. And one of the things that you've probably, if you've attended any of these sessions, the last two sessions last week, we are really trying to focus on a regional information for how work-based learning works, both in North Dakota and Minnesota. And there are some differences, and today we'll be getting a little bit deeper into those Minnesota differences. If we go to the next slide, please. So basically, like Jane said, our focus today is on specific industries. So if you attended the ones last week, we talked about what work-based learning is, how you can get started, and how it works for both high school and college students. We also had Art Thompson from the Workforce Safety and Insurance within North Dakota talk about some safety regulations. The second one was how you as an employer can use work-based learning as a workforce development strategy. And this third one is going to be focusing really deep on ag and construction. So to do that, we're going to follow the agenda that you see here. We're going to have Jane talk through farms. The farms project, you probably wondered what that logo is on the slides that you've seen. So Jane's going to talk about that and then how that feeds into ag workforce. Bryce will talk about construction. Then we'll talk a little bit about OSHA job definitions for hazardous jobs and how you need to think about that, especially with students under 18 in Minnesota. We'll actually have an employer testimonial from Arthur Companies. And then finally, we'll talk about different ways that you can engage, even if you can't have students on site. We will have some time for questions at the end. Like Jane said, please put questions in the chat as we go through this. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Jane, and Jane's going to walk us through farms and egg. So back at you, Jane.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. So Patrick kind of teed this up for me. I feel very, very fortunate to be able to work on the Farms Initiative through the National Science Foundation. This initiative, an award, is different than a typical grant. We were one of 9 engines that were awarded throughout the United States, focusing on workforce development, but also looking at systemic issues that can be tackled through science, innovation, and workforce development. So FARM stands for Food Systems Adapted for Resiliency and Maximized Security. That's probably why you're recognizing that we use the acronym quite a bit. But really what that is really focused on is how, as we as a great state of North Dakota can work to share and understand and innovate related to agriculture, which we have done for centuries, and literally since the beginning of time with our indigenous nations that came before we were here in North Dakota. And really better understanding how that looks. So how do we solve for food insecurity, which is truly national security, through, as I mentioned, the research and innovation. We're focused on agriculture technology from inception to implementation with that food security challenge top of mind. We're going to go to the next slide. And really, what does that mean is, as I mentioned, we're trying to solve for that food insecurity using those scalable technologies. So often when we think about large scale research or even innovation, we often come from the top down. With this award, it really is about coming from the community up. And that is really one of the reasons that we're having this webinar today is through the workforce lens. We cannot innovate, we cannot implement scalable technology without the people and equitable workforce development opportunities for individuals across the state, not just in Fargo, not just in Williston, not just in Minot, but across the state in all 53 counties. And we're trying to test some of these innovations and these strategies so we can take that not only to the entire nation, but globally as well. And so really our vision is utilizing that community-led innovation framework to power ideas that really ultimately we hope that will better feed the world. So through the Farms Network, we have there's 5 core partners. And I think there's always this question. So it's something housed at NDSU, but there's all these people involved, and that is true. The Chamber of Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo, which I serve as the Vice President of Workforce for, is one of those 5 core partners. But what you don't see here is the entire network that is throughout not only North Dakota, the entire region and the nation, that really is starting to support this work. We're about 1.5 years into this opportunity, and we've been able to make some really great strides, which I'm excited to tell you about now. One of those related to the workforce area is we were able to do some listening and learning sessions, our community workforce partnership meetings throughout the entire state over the past 6 months. We had over 230 individuals attend the different sessions. We had 43 different counties represented. And really these structured interviews and sessions were really focused on what are we seeing related to workforce, specifically around ag tech, but also just in your communities, not only related to typical HR type things, but what are we seeing related to retention and recruitment, and what are communities doing? Because really our goal is to find those innovations that are already happening, lift them up, test them, and scale them for a broader audience. One of the initial takeaways from these 9 meetings, this session only captured the 8. We had actually 9 sessions throughout the state with 43 counties, individuals from 43 counties represented. One of the key things, one of the common threads throughout the entire those 9 conversations was we need to get individuals being more aware of the workforce opportunities in the agriculture industries and even in the construction trades. And that's really why we're here today, is the focus and the discussion was no matter if it was in Grafton, North Dakota, Bismarck, Dickinson, throughout the regions, we were hearing we need to help our emerging workforce not only experience, explore, and be more aware of the agriculture industry. And so that's really why we're here today, is to promote that work-based learning that can not only help your workforce, but also provide that incredible awareness and experiential opportunity to that emerging workforce. So we know that there is that when we say agriculture or we say farming, I think we all have a vision, right? So I know I certainly do. Even though I'm married to a producer that does not tip that often, more often probably wears a suit than he is in a tractor anymore. Really, farming and the agriculture industry looks very broad. It's not just an individual utilizing a piece of equipment. We know our ag adjacent industries, especially throughout the entire upper Midwest, is deep and broad. And that also branches right into the construction trades as well. We know that there's farmers and producers, but we also know that there's very divergent needs among the workforce for our ag tech industry. We often know that the technology that is going to be used in the next year or 3 years may not even be developed. And that's really where we're trying to work in this thread through the Farms Initiative to better understand what will those basic skills be needed and how can we best promote those to our emerging workforce. This is a growing industry. What we know and understand and why this is so incredibly important is our population um, globally will increase to 9.7 billion. It's a 27% increase by 2025. That equates into a 70% food demand increase by 2050. But then we also have these very ambitious and sometimes needed goals of net zero carbon consumption through 2050. So balancing that to not only use egg technology, but how do we best utilize individuals and the emerging workforce to better meet those needs and those issues. So our agriculture needs are clear. We need more skilled workers. I kind of spoiled my surprise when I just shared a little bit more about the need. But what skills? Skills are, as I mentioned, more diverse than ever. We're not only seeing those technical skills, how to do the, equipment repairs, how to, market grain, those very specific skills that implement technicians, but also those essential skills. That is what came most out of our community workforce partnership meetings, is those essential skills of translating data, being able to communicate in a way that they can share their technical knowledge with a producer and or an ag adjacent industry, and really being able to connect those industries that are implementing to those that are supporting. And then there's also some very specialized skills that are needed, right? Think about some of the chemicals, the chemical compounds that are needed, the application expertise, nutrition makeup, all of those different things. At the same time, we know that in rural communities that there's less farmers, which frankly equates into less awareness about what ag is, what agriculture really is, and what careers could be possible. But then now more than ever, there's essential ag adjacent careers that are needed. And so there's often that lack of awareness, especially among our emerging workforce and our educators about that. And we'll talk a bit at the end about something that we're providing for educators if you're interested in sharing that with educators in your area. But also, we just need to ensure that what we're hearing from the agriculture industry and what we know through research is that retention is going to be incredibly important, that attraction back to maybe those rural communities for those individuals that have lived there, flexibility within the industry, recognizing that some may need that flexibility, and just the general overall understanding of what those agriculture related fields are. And so I know a lot of you are from agriculture industries, and you probably could have shared more of this information even better than I could. But I think it's important to note that we're finally seeing this come through with some data and some really good movement around how can we innovate related to this. So I feel lucky to be able to share this information with you, and we're going to talk about some of those nuances related to the agriculture industry and some of the workforce work-based learning challenges that aren't insurmountable today.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks, Jane, for that. And I think one of the themes that, Jane touched on, and I think we'll hear this from construction, from Bryce as well, is that there are a lot of different types of roles in ag or in construction that require a vast degree of skills and different talents and different things that students can bring to the table. And our hope is that by participating in work-based learning, students are going to see those opportunities and know that there's something for them, whether it's something that's very hands-on or something that's maybe more working with numbers or whatever it is. There are just so many opportunities in ag, and the same for construction. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bryce, who's going to talk about perspectives from the construction industry and what she's hearing both from her members that she supports, but also what they're seeing nationwide. So Bryce, I'll turn
Yeah.
it over to you.
And right before we turn it over to Bryce, I just wanted to note we had a little bit of a lag in that last slide. So I just wanted to note I was speaking to those safety considerations and opportunities. So we know that they're vast, just like they are in the construction industry. So just wanted to note that. So go ahead, Bryce. Sorry for that interruption.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all. Thank you, Patrick and Jane, and also Heidi for your work and for pulling this all together. As Patrick mentioned, I'm the CEO for the Building Industry Association, formerly the Home Builders Association. And we're still getting used to our new name after 67 years as the HBA. So, but thank you for the opportunity to participate today, and also just to be able to highlight the opportunities that are available in construction for careers, but also some of the challenges that our employers are facing in relation to trying to set up the work-based learning pre-apprenticeship opportunities. And interesting, as Jane was highlighting those opportunities in the ag and farming fields, it's interesting because construction and manufacturing kind of relate back to one another when there are slowdowns. If there is interest rate increases in mortgages federally, that can have a huge impact on construction for residential construction, but that can affect the manufacturing industry in terms of their the supply and demand for equipment that are used on the job site. So ag is, dramatically affected by different things in terms of those manufacturers and the manufacturing of equipment for ag. Same with construction industry, that it's kind of a yin and yang thing. It can have a direct impact and also drive up costs if those equipment pieces aren't available or whatever. So one of the biggest things, and just referencing back to the slide that you're looking at, our challenge really in creating a work-based learning program, the construction industry is under the child labor laws, we are restricted to have individuals under 18 on a job site. There's great restrictions involved. So that's a federal law. And so in North Dakota, and then of course, we're going to hear a little bit in Minnesota how it may differ a little between North Dakota and Minnesota, but the construction industry is limited for job site work if you're under 18. And that's a really big challenge for employers to offer the work-based learning pre-apprenticeship opportunities, because it's hard to come up with a job description when you don't know what the restrictions are. And then in turn, what can you give them for work-based learning opportunities on a job site? And being mindful of the safety, all the parameters that need to be in place, and what kind of hands-on experience can you offer. Right now, today, our in-demand careers, this is just a snapshot, but the carpenters, plumbers, bricklayers, masons, and masons, they are hard to find. And those, just as an example, youth were following into the footsteps of what their parents were doing decades ago, and we don't see that today. But masons are one that it's a rare field to go into, and they're very hot in demand. And it's the same with tilers, the backsplashes of kitchen designs and different things. It's an art. It's really an art, a skill that is disappearing. And so those are some concerns, but these are some of the hottest careers that are in demand, but certainly not limited. And again, I just want to mention too, that relating back with construction, even manufacturing will tie into it because of the equipment and different areas that relate back to construction, where there are other fields that can relate back to the construction field. This is a snapshot of it, certainly not the biggest list. As far as challenges, though, we are really, the construction industry has had a perception problem. For decades, we hear the term laborer, and not construction professional. And that's something that the BIA and our associations across the country have worked really hard on, is changing that perception and image of the industry. Parents often will, push their children to go into a 4-year degree instead of going to the trade schools and community colleges. There are lucrative careers offered in the construction industry across the board. And those labels that we've seen for many, many, many decades, the term labor, even the use of subcontractor, that's our trades partners. But it makes them sound subpar. And so we've worked very hard on the image. These are construction professionals of all areas. And so we're really combating that and hopefully making a difference in terms of that perception. And I've noted too that on this next slide, I feel like some of our work is starting to pay off. For about 20 years now, we're giving scholarships away. Oops, can we go back to that first slide? Thank you. Our rate of investment and the rate of return on that investment is starting to show in terms of young people there's an uptick in the registrations for the trade schools for plumbing, the carpentry, electricians, and so on. According to North Dakota Job Service, right now it shows about 550 online job openings across North Dakota as of April. Again, that is from an industry perspective, but there could be more jobs under different occupations relating to other industries that relate back to construction. So we feel this is kind of a low number. We also feel that the number is trending a little lower than in the past. And in part, that might be due to the slowdown in the construction industry. It could be that we're producing more workforce over the last probably 5-6 years. But so it could be a couple of different things why there are not as many job openings, but still a tremendous amount, which really is crisis level for us still. Those shortages really lead to increased costs in terms of producing housing. And housing will relate back. Housing will spur commercial construction and business development as well. So housing and the construction industry are really critical to the economic health of any region. And if you are looking for skilled labor, you're paying higher wage costs because of the competition amongst those jobs. And that will drive up that cost and impacts affordability and attainability for housing and so on, including home ownership. Being able to achieve home ownership is directly impacted by that as well. The National Association of Home Builders also had the average number of occupational openings at around 723,000 per year. So, over a 2-year period, they're looking at 2.17 million in construction related occupations open. So, and it gives you a pretty dramatic breakdown of all those opportunities out there for hiring and why we're working so hard. We can go on to the next slide. So with that, a lot of opportunities in terms of wage earner. Over the last year, we've seen a 4.3% increase in the average wage levels. In North Dakota, it's between 34 and 38. And again, now this is the average pay per hour. Certainly there are higher paying jobs depending on your skill level. And that's another thing that we really want to point. I mean, it varies, but the starting salaries are pretty amazing for a 2-year degree of like coming out of NDSES or M-State. Anywhere from 70,000 to 100,000 for construction management and some of these other positions. And also the construction industry gives you the ability to be an entrepreneur, own your own business. You are developing a life skill in these various areas of industry, which if you want to own your own business or that life skill will give you the opportunity to go to a higher ed degree if you'd like to do that down the road. The next slide. And this slide really kind of just demonstrates those hourly earnings, and if you move across the country, what those hourly earnings reflect in different states. The next slide. So for the employers, really, some of the things that we're struggling with right now that we're hearing from our members, job ready. Now, one, again, I want to just point out that one of the biggest challenges we face is that under 18 age minimum for the job site, that it's very challenging to bring a young person who's under 18 onto the job site and employ them due to the liabilities of that employer. It gets to be pretty costly because the construction industry, yes, there's many really large employers out there, but primarily when you're looking at the residential construction businesses, those are small businesses. They're 1 and 2 type of 1 and 2 man operations, or under 10 employees, full-time employees. So that makes it very difficult for them to offer. And what we're really trying to create is that pre-apprenticeship opportunity, so that we can garner interest in our industry for those young carpenters and electricians, plumbers, floor laying and that sort of thing. But so we've looked into, could we, through the high schools, can you just back up, please? Thank you. Work with the local schools to develop certificate programs of some sort so that there would be an offering that they're job ready with some sort of certificate for carpentry, and then they can move on to maybe post-secondary for another 9-month certificate and still go back to school, but at least they would be ready to enter the job site, know how to use a forklift, a backhoe, and so on. Again, going back to that age minimum, working with the public school systems on what are the parameters for the employers to follow. It's very hard for them to develop a job description when they don't know the restrictions and the safety parameters. But we need those soft skills, how to work with other employees on the job site for safety perspective, the quality of work, the expectations, and those sort of things. So, and then the other part that we're working hard on is just relaying these positive opportunities to our employers for work-based learning, how to help them navigate the process, develop that job description, work with the schools to ensure that the employer and the student are going to be successful, and in hopes that that student will then either be, taking more classes and moving on to a trade school or going into the industry right off the bat. The career academies are going to be a great help to us as well. Okay, next slide, sorry. So the BIA and also its charitable arm, the Home Builders Care Foundation, work really hard in having opportunities out there for our members for student employer connections. In a few weeks, we have the Herdina Construction Trades Camp. It's a 2-week camp that really introduces kids 15 to 19 into different facets of the construction industry, concrete framing, carpentry, plumbing, electrician, might be sheet metal, and there's lots of different things that they touch on in a 2-week window. It's hosted over at M-State, and then we bring our construction professionals in. Our member volunteers come in, and they're working side by side with these kids. And over the last probably 4 years, we've been maxed on that session registration. We can only take, it's either 24 or 26 kids for that 2-week window. So we are entertaining even developing a second camp for later in the summer. We've also entertained doing a camp for adults who may have been displaced in careers, or maybe individuals who are coming out of incarceration or something like that. So looking into that. The Health Tech Trades Career Expo is another opportunity that it focuses on ninth grade freshmen, but the large surrounding schools, Fargo Public Schools brings their sophomores. All the other large area school systems bring freshmen. It's about 50 to 60 schools. Many of you that are on the call or the session today are participants in the expo, but it's Health Tech Trades. We are the trades portion of that event, and we've had anywhere from 3,800 to 4,500 kids attend, 60 schools from surrounding areas. Often the smaller schools bring sixth grade through 12th grade. And again, from an industry perspective, we prefer the middle schoolers, the sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, because they're choosing their high school registration in classes. And so we haven't lost them yet. But the older the kids get, a lot of them are starting to pick their career paths. So by the time they're freshmen, we may possibly have missed. Patrick.
Yeah, Bryce, I was actually going to say, I'll talk a little bit too about ways that students and employers and schools can get connected on the very last slide. So we do want to make sure that we have enough time for the other presenters. So Bryce, do you have any final comments or final thoughts before we kind of move on to the next presenter?
Nope, that was it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think Bryce, there's just so much activity happening in construction and such a huge need, and it is more difficult to kind of give students those hands-on experiences. So if you could go to the next slide, that's where we're going to talk a little bit more about how you navigate this as an employer. And we did talk during our first session. We had, again, Art Thompson, who is the Director of Workforce Safety and Insurance for North Dakota. He talked a little bit about North Dakota laws and specifically about OSHA guidelines. And that's the language that Bryce was talking about that kind of says, students that are under the age of 18 or people that are under the age of 18 can't do certain things. There are some exceptions that OSHA recognizes if a student is, or if a person is classified as a student learner, or in some cases as an apprentice. And basically what that means is there needs to be a formal relationship between the school, the employer, and the student, which is basically work-based learning, that might allow a student to do certain things that normally they would not be allowed to do under the age of 18. But there has to be a lot of supervision, there has to be insurance considerations, and every state has a little bit of a different flavor of that. The link that you will see under the exemptions apply if the individual is designated, that bullet, Jane will put that in the chat, and that is, again, applicable for North Dakota. It's actually in the Employer Work-Based Learning Handbook. So that is available to you. But Minnesota is a little bit more complicated. There are approved programs that Minnesota youth can do if it's an approved apprenticeship. And you can see a link for all of those opportunities in the URL that's on the page. This will also be in the resource guide. But there are some additional constraints that you need to think about if you are working with a Minnesota student or if you're a Minnesota company working with Minnesota students. And with that, I want to introduce you all to Liesel. Liesel is with the Department of Labor and Industry, and she's basically the go-to person whenever an employer has questions about what children under the age of 18 can and can't do. So I'm going to turn it over to Liesel, and she's going to walk you through some of the Minnesota guidelines. Liesel?
Hi, thank you. I hope everybody can hear me because since we did the Windows 11 update, my microphone keeps going in and out. So hopefully it's okay.
Yep.
Next slide. So just kind of a little background on the Minnesota Child Labor Standards Act. The purpose of it is basically that, we understand that youth learning and learning how to work, learning how to be professional, how to navigate their life as they grow up is a good thing. It's good for them to be trained. It's good for them to, learn responsibility, learn how to become an adult so that they're prepared. However, all of that needs to be done within certain considerations for their safety and their schooling. And so we do have some specific guidelines, and then also just some general overview. This is going to be kind of a very, very quick overview of Minnesota statutes. So if anybody wants more in-depth information, I do have at the end of my slides, I have my contact information, and then also my one of my colleagues, Alana, who is part of our outreach team, outreach and engagement. And she was maybe going to sign on if she had time and could say a quick hi. But otherwise, you can always contact us if you want like a more in-depth explanation or presentation about the Minnesota statutes and rules. But next slide. So this is kind of an overall, like, big picture overview of what the regulations are for youth labor in Minnesota. It's basically broken into 3 categories. Minors who are under 14 years of age in general can't work. There are a couple of exceptions under statute and rule, but in general, they can't work. Minors who are then 15 or 14 and 15 have certain restrictions for the hours that they can work, being they can't work before 7 a.m. or after 9 p.m. They can't work during school hours, again, subject to certain exceptions. And then they can request or they can get an employment certificate for the work during school hours. But it also has to, one thing that we always remind people is that when looking at minors in employment, sometimes Minnesota law is more restrictive, sometimes federal law is more restrictive. And whichever law is more restrictive is the one that an employer has to follow. So it is very important to be aware of both federal restrictions and Minnesota restrictions when employing minors. And then, so anybody then under 18, so generally 16 and 17-year-olds, their time during, if they're working during school hours, it's not prohibited under Minnesota law. Their hours are restricted to before 5 a.m. or after 11 p.m., unless they get a parental consent, which then extends it an extra half an hour each way. All of those, all minors have certain restrictions for hazardous employment, and I'll go through like a couple of examples, but it's not limited to only these things. Next slide. Oh, so quick, there's a couple of special exceptions for agriculture, since we're specifically talking about agriculture and construction. In Minnesota statute 177.23, there it exempts or doesn't include as an under the definition of employee. So basically exempts from overtime restrictions and minimum wage restrictions if somebody is under 18, employed in agriculture on a farm to perform services other than corn detasseling, when one or both of their parents are also working there and give consent. 180 Minnesota statute 181A.11 is provides an exception for working on family-owned farms or parent-owned farms. So if a child is working on their own farm, then there is an exemption from the restrictions. And then also for corn detasseling and other agricultural operations, there's the age restriction is lowered to 12 years old if they have, actually, and the hours restriction is lowered if they have parental permission. And then if a minor is employed on a family farm corporation, which is a little bit complicated to explain under Minnesota law, but if it does apply, then the hazardous employment prohibitions do not apply. Next slide. So, I also have a QR code on these next slides. So if you want to see the full list of these uh, administrative rules that give the hazardous restrictions for 16 and 17, under 16 and under 17, or sorry, under 16 and under 18, um, then you can scan the QR codes and look at the full lists on the Minnesota Revisor Statutes website. But so for those who are 14 and 15, some general restrictions that I tried to pick some that would apply to these kind of industries would be operating or assisting in the operation of machinery, which could include, but isn't limited to, farm type tractors, self-propelled vehicles, snow blowers, sidewalk type like push snow blowers, or um, riding lawnmowers, any other push lawnmowers, any other, basically power driven lawn and garden equipment. Um, it also includes restrictions on any oiling, cleaning, or maintaining of any of the machinery, whether it's, stationary or not. And so basically, like if they're 14 or 15, they shouldn't even be touching the machinery. Um, even if they're not actually operating it. They can't do welding of any kind, and they, um, oh, as a driver, they can't be a driver on a motor vehicle except under specific exceptions under the next rule. And then they can't be at any processing plants, so meat processing, food processing. They can't be in manufacturing or commercial warehouses, um, and any occupations in agriculture that the U.S. Secretary of Labor has found to be particularly hazardous. And I know this sounds like a lot of restrictions, honestly, but in general, for under 16, um, Minnesota law is actually less restrictive than federal law. um, so again, just make sure that you're also checking with federal law. Next slide. So then hazardous employment for under 18, there would be restrictions on being in a place that has chemicals, compounds, vapors, gases, anything like that, that would be in excessive temperatures, explosive or toxic quantities. So things that could, blow up or be toxic if they come in contact with them. If there's restrictions on logging, sawmills, mines, gravel pits. There is just a general restriction on being in the on site for construction or building projects. And also in the operation or assisting in the operation of power driven machinery, which would include like forklifts, pallet jacks, things like that. And then any operation of non-automatic lifts or hoisting machines. Certain exceptions for driving motor vehicles. They can't do specific types of welding, and they can't be higher than 12 feet off the ground to do window washing, wall cleaning, painting, building maintenance, those kind of things. So again, those are not like full list. Those are just kind of ones that I picked out that it seemed like would apply because it's a really big topic. And there are, again, certain exceptions for family-owned businesses or parent-owned, actually, I shouldn't say family, parent-owned businesses, very specifically. And then whether they're farms or just like if a parent has, a store or something like that. There are also exceptions for being outside the area of hazard. So if I said there's a general restriction on being able to be present on site for construction or building projects, but if they are able to be outside the area of hazard, so if they're able to work in the office, do part of the planning or be involved in that, learning about that area before they turn 18 and get the more apprenticeship type hands-on experience. That could be something that they could do. Um, Also, I didn't have a slide in there for it, but it is on our website. We do have the youth skills training program, which they work with schools and employers in certain industries, which includes agriculture, to help with um, connecting with for work-based learning opportunities for students. And again, if you want more in-depth information, this is our contact information. So you can contact, probably the best contact for the presentations would be Alana, um, because she is part of that outreach and engagement team. And, but if you have specific questions about, whether something would be possible, or if, an employer wants to do work-based learning and is, not sure if one specific situation would be allowed under Minnesota law, they can always contact us to talk about it too.
Cool. Thank you so much, Liesl, for walking us through that. And like I said, what we want to be is a resource to help you as the employer figure out what's appropriate or not appropriate for students to do. So you have Liesl and Alana's information here in the report out from the first webinar. You'll have Art Thompson's. And of course, you can always reach out to myself at Golden Path or Jane or Heidi at the Chamber, and they will be able to kind of get you directed to the right person. So I'm going to talk to you. So you heard a lot of different things about restrictions. I'm going to talk in just a second about things that you can do with the school, but we really do want students to connect with employers. And so to kind of share some perspectives from the employer side, we've invited our special guest, Brittany Grussing. Brittany is with the Arthur Companies, and she can explain a little bit more what the Arthur Companies do and also how they are working with students, including college students. So remember, work-based learning is not just high school. We also want you to connect with college students. So with that, I will turn it over to Brittany.
Awesome. Thank you. And I will be quick, I promise. But some of our experiences with local high schools has been really great. So we have partnered with Northern Cass and also with Harvey High School in their co-op program, which has been great. And what this does is it allows us to bring kids in between the ages of 16 and 18. Generally speaking, we bring them into the office environment. Mostly. So we give just a little bit exposure of, the outside world because we're a very physical labor organization. But we mostly keep them kind of in that office environment. So I know, like listening to Lisa, I always get nervous, when you talk through all of those restrictions. And so we a little bit harbor some of those folks specific to the office environment. But I think the cool thing about these co-op programs is connecting with the schools for folks that really have an interest. Maybe they're on a family farm and things like that, but they want to pursue agronomy, post their high school education, or agribusiness and econ or ag econ, and we can put them in the office with one of our agronomists or leaders, and maybe one day every pay period, so one day every 2 weeks. We actually onboard them as an employee, so they go through our full pre-employment process, which includes background check and a drug screen with parental consent. And part of that is part of our safety program as well, so keeping everyone safe at work. And so we work through the minor process with that. As part of the onboarding piece, we go through safety orientation, general orientation, and we onboard them like we would any other employee. But then, like I said, we kind of harbor them in the office and kind of protect them and surround them that way. And we really do limit, generally speaking, what what they can do from not having them around big machinery and things of that nature. And they're not doing any driving for us. And so that was always something I was really nervous about. Just to be honest, like we've talked about, folks younger than 18, but it's something that we've worked through and overcome and just understood what the kind of the restrictions are. And I think the folks that we've had have been great, from a student perspective. We very much work with an intern program for those that are over 18. We've seen success also when folks are pre-college, post-high school graduation. Most of those folks have been 18 up until this point. And so we've been very blessed, I think, to have some local, we're out in Arthur and, Hope Page area, Air and Pillsbury on the eastern side of the state, and then out in Harvey and Animos in the central part of the state. We've been very lucky in that small town atmosphere to have a good connection with the schools, and have some folks apply to our internships that are maybe younger than college age, which has been great. For example, we've had a Hope Page student that's on her third summer with us, and has continued to come back. And she's also worked through the school year as well while she's been in college. Obviously, we hope we can keep her, post school, but she's been phenomenal and been able to really spend time across our different business lines from, our research and development group, which is, fairly new to us, but then in the operations side of the business, agronomy, grain, a little bit of everything, and then past 18, we have the same restrictions as most of our other employees as well. So it makes it, a little less restrictive in that perspective, but we onboard them like we would any other employee and keep up with their safety training like we would with any other employee as well. So it's been very advantageous for us. So I hope this sheds a little bit of light just on the employer experience. If you're thinking about it, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm super happy to chat with you on what we've done up until this point. So back to you, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brittany, for sharing that. And as Brittany was talking, there are a few things that came to mind that I want to touch on before we go to our last slide for this session. But one is really thinking about the continued experience for the student. So I love the idea of bringing them in, giving them some exposure to the floor or where the labor happens, but also keeping them in the office, helping them get to know you, and then staying connected with them for after they graduate and then even into college. We think very much, and we talked about this during our second session, about how work-based learning is a workforce development strategy. And what you do with high schoolers is one part of that. But ultimately, the hope is that you can develop a relationship and that becomes a long-term worker for you. The second thing is, if you're nervous about different things, or if you just don't know, one of the reasons we went into such detail is because we really do want it to be very clear, so we know for sure what's not allowed, but we can also put to rest any misconceptions about what might be allowed with certain designations. So I really do encourage you. We will share recordings of this. We will send out links to all of the different things that you saw, and please do reach out to Alana, to Liesel, or to Art Thompson. And sometimes even just having an email from them saying, this is cool, you can do that, is really helpful. And I know that they would be willing to do that. Now, there are some other ways to offer or support students in high school or as part of their journey that don't require them to be on site with you. And I want to cover that just at a high level on this last slide. So one really cool opportunity to get connected with students is during different events or organizations driven by what are called CTSOs, or Career and Technical Student Organizations. You all might have had students that did FFA or DECA or FBLA or Skills USA, but usually these are programs that are managed by state leaders within the schools. There are high school versions and there are college versions of a lot of these. And in some ways, it gives students the real world experience that they would get on your site, but it's in a more controlled environment. So for example, Skills USA, there will actually be competitions, usually hosted at a place that's been approved and is considered safe, that might actually be happening in high schools, and then students go on to compete maybe at the state level. And what we've been seeing is that there are more organizations that are becoming part of those, to get to know students, to help coach them, to give them some feedback, maybe even to offer equipment or different things for them to use during these competitions. DECA and FBLA are not necessarily tied to the labor part of these industries, but definitely the business side of them. Agribusiness, insurance, construction management, those are things that leadership skills that students might be getting in those organizations. So if you don't necessarily want to have a student on site, or you're not sure you're ready for that yet, please consider supporting these organizations. We'll send out information about upcoming competitions. And another way to get involved is actually working with students at the school. So how many of you have driven by a high school and you see a house that's in the parking lot that starts out as frames and then it starts to get more completed as time goes on? That is done by a class. Sometimes they will have employers come in and coach students on framing or whatever, electrical wiring. And that is all happening at the school. So insurance is covered by the school. And in some cases, those experiences count as work-based learning. So if you have any questions about those, please reach out to us. You can reach out to your local school, reach out to Liesel or to Art. And we just appreciate the work that you do, both to help our students understand what their futures can look like, but also the work that you're doing to develop your own future workforce. With that, I just want to spend 1 minute kind of recapping now that we're at the end of this session. For those of you that maybe weren't on the first 2 sessions, again, those are recorded. So the first session was what is work-based learning? The second session was how do you use it as a strategy? And this third session was to go deeper on ag and construction. If anybody was on all 3, we will send you a little ribbon for sitting through all the different different presentations, but they will all be recorded. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Jane for any last minute questions or comments that Jane would like to make, and then talk about the survey. So Jane.
Yeah, so as Patrick mentioned, and as I shared at the beginning of our time today, is we would love your feedback on what more do you need to learn, and how can we help facilitate that learning and or connection. And I know that we have about 3 minutes left as well. If you have any questions, I encourage you to either come on camera or drop those in the chat. But I feel like today it may have felt a little bit defeating related to workforce or work-based learning, that there's a lot of regulations, but truly, once you kind of have that first one or a few, it really is, and Brittany talked about this, that it really does create a pipeline and an easier flow of individuals. So we encourage you that if you have questions, Patrick just mentioned that all of those resources are available from the first 3 webinars. But frankly, I know that Patrick would be willing. I love how I just, elected you to do that, Patrick, alongside of me and my colleague Heidi. If you have any questions about this, or you're like, I want to do this, but I don't even know where to start, we are really here for you to connect you either to the Minnesota resources, which are vast, along with the North Dakota resources, and we have to consider those federal regulations too. So just want to invite you, if you have any questions or if you think of questions after the fact, we are here for you to share that information with, to connect, and really, if we need to do another, just maybe even Q&A webinar related to construction and or agriculture, we're more than happy to facilitate those things. So we would love your feedback. I know probably all of you have a device sitting either in your hand or nearby you. If you're anything like me, and most of us in this world, please scan that QR code and give us feedback. It really does help us better understand what we can do more. And then the other thing I do want to mention is just my appreciation for you being willing to not only take the time today to learn more about this, but also to my co-presenters being willing to share their expertise. Putting all this information together is no easy feat. So we just really appreciate it, and especially to you, Brittany, for sharing that employer perspective of, it might seem daunting, but it is possible, and it's such a great opportunity. And it doesn't mean that you have to have, a crew of 6 people working that are all, 16 to 18 in whatever industry you're having. It can be some of these other opportunities that we've talked about today. So just want to express my appreciation to all of you, let you know that there are resources available. And again, thank you to the NSF Farms Initiative for allowing us to understand that this is an opportunity that we needed to fill in that gap of information. And we'll be doing that throughout the entire award. So just really appreciate everyone today.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to see everybody. And If you guys are interested, reach out to your local schools. You can follow up with our resources. We actually have a newsletter that we send out monthly where we'll talk about best practices. So there are just a lot of resources, and I think a lot of state investment on both Minnesota and North Dakota side to try to make it easier for you as employers to offer work-based learning to students and actually to help drive that more in the schools. So appreciate it. Thank you to our presenters. Thank you everyone for joining. It's been awesome. Appreciate all of you very much, and we will see you later. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.